So I want to talk today about something that I haven't always been the best at, and that is it's great to meet new people all the time, and that's really important in terms of building an audience, and it's like important to continually do that. But the other piece of that is maintaining those relationships and keeping in contact with people who are valuable in your network. And the thing is, every person you meet is not going to be worth a follow-up and is not going to be worth like spending additional time on. And we go into these spaces, they're big spaces with lots of people, and sometimes you only have so much time, and sometimes there isn't really a connection, and there isn't really a way that you can see that you can really like help each other. So that's okay. But the thing is, if every connection just turns into like this one-time casual connection, then you don't build any kind of deeper relationships from that. And if you haven't built those deeper relationships, that can be a really tempting thing to do, is just go around and like not follow up and not have deeper connections with anybody. But ultimately that doesn't really work, because usually you're building on an audience for a reason. And so some of those people are going to end up with a lot closer relationship to you than maybe like initially, like from the first meeting. So discerning like who is a valuable connection and what is a waste of time, that requires a skill. It requires intuition. It requires tapping into that inner knowing and not just making decisions on the basis of what worked for you or maybe didn't work for you in the past. Because when we're meeting people who are completely different from us in completely different spaces, we have to start thinking outside of the usual, like, who do I need in my network? Sometimes you don't even know who you need in your network because you haven't networked enough to make those kinds of decisions. So that's one of the important things about networking, is you're never really done. Because basically you need to network to learn how to network, and every space, every group, every subculture has its own rules and its own customs and its own way of doing things. And even like within the coaching industry, different groups will do things in a different way in terms of marketing, in terms of how people connect with one another. And I know a lot of people say, like, you don't want to talk business stuff immediately and you want to get to know a person, but on the other hand, if you spend too much time in that getting to know you phase, then you can end up wasting a lot of time on people who really are not going to be able to provide much for each other. So it's finding that happy medium with that. And that can also be a tricky thing. So like, don't expect you're gonna get it like right the first time. It really takes a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error, a lot of getting out of your own way and just doing it instead of worrying about doing everything perfectly from the start, because that's just not going to happen. And I think people who are on the outside of this, who've never done any serious networking, can be like, well, you don't need to do all that. But if you know you need to network, then you're going to have to do it one way or the other. And so establishing that habit, establishing that mindset, that's really a big deal if you haven't already done that. And even if you do have it, when you go into different groups, you're going to have to start all over again, basically, in terms of learning how to work the space and find the people within that space that can help you, which is why it's so important to join groups, because you're meeting lots of people who are similar in a certain way, so you can kind of get a perspective on the whole scenario and not just like one person who's a representative of that, because sometimes that one person can be misleading because they have their own way of doing anything and they might not necessarily be the right one for you. And I was on a networking meeting yesterday, and a couple of the entrepreneurs on there were talking about, I think it was BNI, and one said she had like a lot of great connections there, really helped her business, and the other one was living in a different location, different scenario. It didn't really help her that much. But everybody is going to be a little different. There's no like one guaranteed place that you go to network, because even what you're looking for in your network is going to be different from person to person. And one of the things that makes a network valuable is the fact that it's different from everybody else's network, because if it's the same network as everybody else, then it's not really as valuable. The fact that it's different makes it valuable. So that's going to be all for today. Hope to see you soon.